Hey everyone, you're listening to the Fantasy Football Uptick. I'm Jeremiah Blue, and today I would like to start off by saying may the fourth and goal be with all of you guys. So today we're going to have a special episode. We're going to be talking about Star Wars fantasy themed team names. For me, I like to change my name a lot. I put a lot into my fantasy team name, so I came up with a couple. I found a couple online, and we're going to go over my top 10 Star Wars fantasy football themed team names. Okay, so afterwards, let me know what you guys think. Let me know if you guys got any other ones. I like to put a lot of it on luck. If I have a 2-game losing streak, I will typically go through and change my fantasy team name. And in my mind, that it adds good fortune to my roster. So if you've ever played in a fantasy league with me, you know that I have a tendency to do that. And when I see somebody losing a lot, I always suggest change the team name. You need to change the team name. So this is in no particular order. I do have my favorite. I'll let you know when I get to that point. But for the most part, I'm just going to start, and I'll talk a little bit of fantasy about the guys that the team name is based off of. So the first one on my list is Empire Strikes Mac. Obviously, that's for Marlon Mack, but I know a lot of us are down on Marlon Mack. If you're in a dynasty league, this is actually a good time to buy Marlon Mack because he only has 1 year left on his deal. While next year I'm not expecting anything, nor will the guy holding Mack be expecting anything since they just drafted a running back to that roster. He will get to handpick the team that he goes to next season. So assuming somebody buys into his idea of him being good, this would be a good time to buy low on Marlon Mack because you can get him for almost nothing right now, because especially in a dynasty league, because nobody's expecting anything out of Marlon Mack. I like to think back to when Jerick McKinnon was on the Vikings. He wasn't starting for the Vikings. I knew his free agency was coming up. I ended up picking him up as a backup, just leaving him on my bench. The next year, he gets signed by the 49ers. Now, the 49ers, he got hurt before he actually started to play for the Niners, but he had got a monster contract, so he was going to be their workhorse. I ended up trading Jerick McKinnon for Zach Ertz. So that's just something you could do with Max. So let me start moving on past these things. The next one on my list is Wookiee mistakes. So if this is your first year in a fantasy league, or this is your first year joining that particular fantasy league, you're technically a rookie. Wookiee mistakes. If you're a Star Wars nut, that's a good name for that. If you're a Seattle fan, Seattle Ewoks I liked. I was debating between Seattle Ewoks and the 12th Mandalorian. I stuck with Ewoks, and I got Mandalorian on this list later, and I didn't want to put both of them on there because, come on, Seahawks fans are already unbearable as it is. I'm not trying to put 2 Seahawks names on my list of 10. The next on my list is the Han Solo. So if you're a Vikings fan, that's their saying, Skol, right? So Han Solo shot first if you're really nerdy, because there was that whole controversy in Star Wars whether or not Han Solo actually shot first or didn't shoot first. The way it was originally written was Han Solo shot first. It got changed, and now it's back to Han Solo shot first. Anyways, that's a thing for real Star Wars nerds. But yeah, if you're a Vikings fan and you want to do something Star Wars themed, Han Solo shot first is the one I'm suggesting. And then this one I actually really, really like, but I'm not a Green Bay fan. So all the Green Bay fans, if you're out there, Lando Calrissian, which is one of the main characters in Star Wars, and I like to throw in, I love Lando Calrissian, talking about Jordan Love from this year's first round, which is a pretty controversial first round pick. I'll do a podcast later talking about Jordan Love specifically, but in dynasty leagues, I actually kind of like where Jordan Love landed because of the fact that Jordan Love, I thought he was very raw coming out. Like, obviously, he had the turnover issues, but he's got loads and loads of talent. Probably the most talented quarterback in this year's class from a raw talent perspective. So if they can get some of the mental things right there, maybe fix some of the rawness that is in Jordan Love, and being able to learn behind a guy like Aaron Rodgers, assuming Aaron Rodgers kind of takes him under his wing, which, again, nobody really thinks that's going to happen. But still, he's going to get to watch, film study, learn from Aaron Rodgers, even if Aaron Rodgers doesn't really want to teach him anything. I think this is going to be good for him in the long run. Dynasty-wise, I like Love now. I didn't really like him coming before he got drafted, not knowing where he was going to land. But now I really do kind of like him because I know he's going to get to sit and wait and learn. He's not going to get out there and be embarrassed and lose a lot of that confidence that I'm sure that he has coming into the NFL, right? The next one on my list is Brady Yoda. And I'm not a Brady fan, but if you're in Tampa now, if you're a New England fan, that works for really both of you guys. Or if you own Brady on your fantasy team, Brady Yoda. It's a play on words with the Baby Yoda from The Mandalorian, which is killing it. By the way, if you haven't watched The Mandalorian, watch The Mandalorian. That's not a plug. That is just like that show is amazing. So if you haven't watched it, if you're even a little bit of a Star Wars fan, go watch it. But honestly, I don't even think you need to watch Star Wars to watch and enjoy The Mandalorian. Then My Le'Veon Falcon. Now you have to use the Millennium Falcon in some play if you're going to do a list of Star Wars fantasy football team related names. I was bouncing between a lot. Like, I wanted to get Mahomes in here, but the Mahomian Falcon, My Le'Veon Falcon sounded the best. Also, all the players on really the Falcons offense are millennials. So the Millennial Falcons, that's another one that I was thinking about. But I landed on Le'Veon Falcon would probably be the best if you were going to go that way. And Le'Veon Bell this year, I think he's going to have a bounce back year. I think this is a buy low time for Le'Veon Bell, both in redraft and dynasty. He's still not very old. Sam Darnold is just getting better. And I really, really love Sam Darnold in dynasty leagues. I think his stock is as low as it's ever going to go. I think he's going to end up being a perennial Pro Bowler within 2 to 3 years. The offense is going to be better next year. They drafted an offensive lineman. They got Mims, who I really like at receiver. I actually thought for being a receiver-loaded draft, Mims actually went the farthest back of all the receivers I really, really like. Like, he went the latest. He was kind of like the biggest steal from a receiver perspective outside of like CeeDee Lamb, who should have been the first receiver off the board. So I think Mims is going to be a really good addition. I think I talked in my first video, or the video I did about 3 or 4 days ago, about what I think Jamie Crowder is going to do. I think that offense is really going to click next year, and I think the Jets are going to surprise a lot of people. They're going to be one of the most surprising teams in the NFL. I think Le'Veon Bell has that bounce back year thanks to that. And then help us, OBJ, you are our only hope. So Obi-Wan Kenobi, OBJ, it works, right? So the thing with OBJ is I think he's a buy low too, because the Browns were so terrible last year, and whether he stays or goes, it doesn't really matter. OBJ is super, super talented. So I know he's outside of that like top 10 receiver right now in like ADPs. So if he stays out there, I mean, he's one of those guys that has a high floor and a high upside. So OBJ is one of those guys that definitely needs to be on everybody's radar as far as receivers go. And we'll get into the draft strategies later. That's not really what this video is about. But I personally have been thinking I'm going to probably lean towards a take 2 good running backs, because the receivers that come after like the top 6 are basically, they're good. They're about the same all the way to like 25. So it's like 7 and 25. It's like there's not a real big gap. So I'm going to start trying to lean heavy in the running back department this year is what I'm looking at now. And I'll do a whole video on that later. But OBJ is one of those guys I'll be targeting that I can get later, especially if he keeps falling the way he has been. And then this was going to be General Dakbar, but my wife was helping me out with this because she's a super big Star Wars nerd. So I was like, let me throw her a bone. She gave me the Minshewlorian. The Minshewlorian. So if you got Gardner Minshew and you're in a super flex, because that's the only time you're starting Gardner Minshew, let's be honest, super flex fantasy league this year, that might be one for you. The super flex leagues, if all quarterbacks are on in those kind of leagues, all of them. And if you're in like one of the leagues that I'm in is a dynasty 14-team super flex league, like you got to think 14 teams. Everybody's trying to start 2 quarterbacks. That's 28 quarterbacks off the board just like that. That means there's 4 reserves, assuming everybody has 2 starting quarterbacks. I know one of my buddies, Sean Campbell, shout out to you, has Gardner Minshew. So if he's a Star Wars nerd. So like if he's going Star Wars on his team, the Minshewlorian would be pretty good. Which he's also got Kyler Murray. So just Kyler Ren would also be good, because Kyler, it's almost too easy. Yeah, maybe Minshewlorian would be a little bit better in that department. And then my personal favorite, which I came up with, was Drew or Drew Lock. There is no try. And I guess if you had T.Y. Hilton, you could have Drew or Drew Lock. There is no T.Y. Or if you don't have Drew Lock, because if you're in a 1 quarterback league, why would you have Drew Lock? Although I think Drew Lock is worth owning as a backup this year because he's got a lot of upside. You could have Drew or Drew not, because somebody's going to own Drew Brees, right? So Drew Brees, actually, since we're talking about Drew Brees, last podcast we talked about Jameis Winston. Something that I forgot to mention when talking about Jameis Winston, because the last podcast was about what veteran quarterback is worth stashing. Obviously, a lot of people are going to be stashing rookie quarterbacks, but which one might have the opportunity to become a starter next season? Well, the case that I made was for Andy Dalton because I feel very confidently that Andy Dalton is going to be a starter next season somewhere, whether it be the Indianapolis Colts or the Jacksonville Jaguars or the New England Patriots, right? But Jameis Winston, I thought the only way to a starting job that he has is either with the New Orleans Saints themselves after Drew Brees retires, or with going to a different roster and competing for a starting job, right? But one of the listeners asked me, well, if Jameis Winston takes over the New Orleans Saints job, that's going to be huge. Well, here's the thing that I didn't really talk about was that I expect Drew Brees to play for 2 more years. Think about this. Brady and Brees both signed 2-year contracts, right? I think it's very important to Drew Brees to be the all-time leading passer in the league. And I think Brady's chasing the same thing. But Drew Brees currently has a 3,000-yard advantage over Brady. So if Brady has been very vocal that he plans on playing 2 years. And the contract that he signed is basically it's going to be a 2-year contract. I think he promised the Tampa Bay Bucks that he's going to play for 2 years. Well, I think Brees will again play for 2 years. Jameis has got a 1-year deal, so Jameis will go somewhere else. But what I'm saying is I would bank on Drew Brees being Drew Brees for 2 more years. That's what I'm saying. So anyways, that's a little fantasy nugget, dynasty, keeper league, whatever. I think Drew Brees still got 2 years left in him. I think a lot of people will probably be trying to trade Drew Brees, trade Brady. I think they're both going to play for at least 2 more years. And then Drew Lock, we were talking about how improved his team is as a whole. They drafted 2 wide receivers in the first 2 rounds. They got what a lot of people call Jerry Jeudy the best receiver. I don't think he was the best receiver. I still think CeeDee Lamb was the best receiver. You can go to my CeeDee Lamb versus Jerry Jeudy podcast if you want to hear the difference that I broke down those two. But I still think Jerry Jeudy's good. He was that number 2 guy. He's an elite receiver. He's going to be good. I have full faith he's going to be successful in the NFL. Then they got Handler. So now they got 2 good receivers. They drafted offensive linemen. They picked up offensive linemen throughout free agency. Good offensive linemen in free agency. And then Melvin Gordon, which I think was probably the best free agent running back on the market. So that offense is going to be a lot better. Drew Lock is going to be a lot better this year. You got to remember, Drew Lock was hurt all last year, so he couldn't even practice while he was waiting. He didn't come to the Broncos till late the end of the year, but he couldn't even practice because he was in the IR, right? So I think this year, having somewhat of a training camp, obviously the coronavirus and stuff is gonna cause trouble on that, but having a full off season, having some plays under his belt, and getting a new offensive coordinator, know that's usually a negative. Pat Shurmur's a really, really good offensive coordinator. Having head coaching job beforehand. If it were me, if I had to take right now in a dynasty league, Drew Lock or Justin Herbert, I would take Drew Lock over Justin Herbert. So I think that's where I rated Drew Lock coming out of college. From what I saw last year, I thought he was really good. I know that Justin Herbert was taken in the first round. Drew Lock's a second round pick. But I like Drew Lock to that level. I really think Drew Lock's going to be good in the NFL. Well, that's it for today's show. Hopefully, I didn't bore you with all my Star Wars nerd stuff, but it is May the 4th. So May the 4th be with all you guys. See ya!